Is it still loading? Is it still loading, by the way?
It is.
I'm having challenges here. So I apologize. One second if I can get the.
Graham, this is Megan. Do you want me to go ahead and open it?
Well, are y'all seeing it now? Are you seeing my presentation? Let me try one more time. All right. How about now?
Yeah,
Yep.
Here it is.
Great. Excellent. All right. So sorry about the hiccup. All right. So my name is Graham Owen. I'm a Department of Planning and Development planner. So work with Nick in all things related to land use planning at the long range or comprehensive plan level. Got a couple of colleagues here as well, Megan Van Dam, also with DPD. I know that Commissioner Sargent, I think, is also on the call. So he was instrumental along with Catherine Ward in looking at this with the task force. So a lot of good folks who have been working on this plan amendment over the past year. So just a couple of things that we wanted to do tonight. First, we wanted to provide you with a very brief overview of the comprehensive plan, what it is, how it's used, because that's really kind of the primary focus of tonight is, looking at the long range plan for Fairfax County, in particular, how it applies to this specific site. So then we'll also go into the site considerations for the plan amendment studies. This is 2806 Popkins Lane, some of the key considerations, and then go into the staff, task force, and planning commission recommendations. All right, so before we get into Popkins specifically, I wanted to give you a kind of a brief overview of the comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan is a long-range guide for decision-making about built and natural environment. It sets forth the community's vision for the future on a variety of topics, such as the use of land, public facilities, housing, transportation, those kinds of high-level topic areas. And it helps the county manage its growth, maintain a high quality of life for its residents, and preserve the environment. The plan is a legally required document in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Every locality has to have one. And the purpose and the intent of the comp plan is expressed in goals and objectives and policies, which are contained in what's called the policy plan. So these are countywide policies that are applicable across the county. Then we also have more specific guidance in one of the 4 area plans. So this is this map that you see on here is part of the comprehensive plan as it relates to the Mount Vernon district and parts of the Lee district along Richmond Highway. The county's ordinances and regulations, think about like zoning, for example, those are there to implement the comprehensive plan. One thing I would want to point out right off the bat is that the plan provides policy and recommendations. It's not law, however. And the important thing to note is that we do use it when we are making decisions about when the planning commission, the board of supervisors, when they're making decisions about land use applications. We look to the comprehensive plan for guidance. The comp plan is a living document. It's constantly being updated through what are called amendments, one of which is the subject of tonight's meeting. So amendments can be considered to address countywide issues such as changes to policies regarding housing, heritage resources, transportation, or through updates to the area plans, as I mentioned. So Embark Richmond Highway, for example, that's an example of a large-scale amendment that was considered several years ago. And then we can also have amendments that concern more specific sites. And that's what we're dealing with today with Popkins Lane. So the amendment process always involves community engagement and outreach. In the case of Popkins Lane, this involves what we call the SSPA, or Site-Specific Plan Amendment Task Force, which is an appointed group of community members who are tasked to look at this specific amendment in detail. And so they met over the course of the summer of 2020 and into 2021, looking at this amendment in particular. Here's the timeline for the plan amendment, just to kind of get you oriented in terms of where we are. So the proposal for a plan amendment was submitted in December of 2019 as a part of our SSPA process. This is just high level, the county's regular cycle for considering site-specific changes in the plan. So we allow for submissions to come forward and we review them. This amendment was reviewed in the summer and fall of 2020 by the Mount Vernon SSP Task Force. At the time, the task force recommended that the proposal be considered for further study. And following a hearing by the Planning Commission in November of 2020, the Board of Supervisors authorized staff to begin the formal amendment review process. So the task force continued their work with the amendment in a series of meetings last spring, which was followed by another round of hearings with the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. So following those hearings, the board deferred their decision on it and requested additional outreach on the amendment. So one additional thing that I wanted to just kind of point out right off the bat, what we're dealing with in terms of 2806 Popkins Lane is a comprehensive plan amendment only. We're not looking at a development application or rezoning at this time. We don't have one that we're looking at. So we're just looking at changes to the comprehensive plan. So I would imagine that most of y'all are familiar with the site, given that you live immediately nearby, but just to give you kind of some of the high level information about it. So it's 5.5 acres and it's located along Popkins Lane, east of Memorial Heights and east of the Richmond Highway corridor. And it's directly across from Bryant High School. 1.3 acres of the site, which is fronting on Popkins Lane, is developed with the Verizon switching station and associated surface parking. The remaining 4.2 acres of the site's interior and the rear are undeveloped and wooded. The site's topography slopes down toward the northwest and higher elevations along Popkins Lane in the eastern boundary. The site also contains frontage on the cul-de-sacs on Eastleigh Avenue and Preston Avenue in the Memorial Heights neighborhood, which abut the site to the northeast. However, these cul-de-sacs do not currently provide vehicular access to the site today. I would note that while the rear portion of the site is undeveloped currently, the comprehensive plan does call for residential use for this site at a density of 3 to 4 units to the acre, consistent with the Memorial Heights Communities Plan recommendation. So under this current plan, this means that approximately 16 units could potentially be developed in the future. This site is also currently zoned for residential use. The current zoning is R3, which would allow for 1/3 of an acre lots, and you'd have a plan potential or development potential of about 12 units under the existing zoning. There is an ability to rezone under the current plan to R4, which is slightly higher in terms of residential density. If the site were to be rezoned, the zoning potential would be 16 units to the acre. So again, that's under the current comprehensive plan recommendation today. It's not under the consideration with the plan amendment. This is the way that it is today on the ground. So the plan amendment authorization, or kind of the permission to study this site in particular, had some specific language. It directed staff to consider residential use at a new density range of 5 to 8 dwelling units to the acre. This proposed amendment would retain the switching station along Popkins Lane and results in a planned potential of up to 33 units on the remaining 4.2 acres of the site. So this is about 17 additional units over what the current comprehensive plan has today. I would note that 33 units, that's the maximum that was authorized for the study, but as you'll see further on in the presentation, that total development potential level was lowered in the recommendations by staff and the planning commission. I'll get to that in a little bit later. Some specific considerations for the review of the comp plan amendments identified with the board's authorization include a review of the watershed management plans and an evaluation of the optimal points of site access and impacts to a localized transportation network. There was an additional consideration for the potential for workforce housing. However, it was determined during the plan amendment review that this site did not meet the criteria for workforce dwelling units. So there was no specific language added to the comprehensive plan along those lines, or added to the plan recommendation, along those lines. So the primary staff considerations for this plan amendment have been how would an increase in density fit into the existing neighborhood context, given that the site is surrounded by both single family homes at a lower density, as well as townhouses at an equivalent density to what we're looking at here. And then also additionally, what are the impacts to the tree canopy on the site, both under the adopted plan recommendation and the proposed plan recommendation. Stormwater, we heard during the planning commission public hearing that stormwater and flooding are issues on the site, and how would those be addressed with the proposed change? And then also, how would the site be accessed from a multimodal connectivity standpoint? So from a land use standpoint, the site, as I mentioned, is planned for 3 to 4 units to the acre compatible with the surrounding uses. The area to the east, generally outside of Memorial Heights, within Memorial Heights is 3 to 4 units to the acre, and then immediately to the northeast is 2 to 3 units to the acre. However, the Bryant Town Court townhouse community of 14 townhouses, which is immediately adjacent down Popkins Lane, is developed at approximately 8 dwelling units to the acre, which is equivalent again to that upper end of the density range that's being considered with this study. The site's current planned density is 3 to 4 units, and that's harmonious with Memorial Heights. But given the variety of densities and unit types in the surrounding residential neighborhoods, an increase in density could provide for a compatible transition between the lower density Memorial Heights neighborhood and higher density Bryan Town Court townhouses, if you had additional considerations from a policy standpoint. So the front portion of the site, again, developed with the Verizon switching station, rear portions heavily developed. The forested conditions on the site are providing important environmental benefits, including reduced urban heat island effects, removing air pollutants, absorbing carbon dioxide. In considering the amendment, staff notes that the county environmental policies support maximizing tree canopy on developed and developing sites, maximizing the amount of tree canopy through preservation rather than just through replanting after construction is also noted as a way in our policy plan that you can protect county streams from the impacts of new development, for example. Regarding stormwater, the current forested conditions do help stormwater infiltrate back into the ground. However, we did hear that there are flooding complaints in the area with the existing condition. We had one gentleman that came to the Planning Commission hearing, lives near the site. He's indicated that he experiences basement flooding. So as a result, the existing forested conditions do not appear to be fully capturing stormwater runoff from the site. So future development, either under the current plan recommendation or with the amendment under consideration, would need to address stormwater and drainage in line with our county regulations and policies. In terms of guidance for stormwater, our goal here when we're looking at this is trying to set the expectation for stormwater controls, and as well as making sure that we're not doing so in a manner that jeopardizes tree preservation goals. So you have these kind of two major environmental goals that need to be successfully addressed on the site today. So when we look at amendments to the comprehensive plan, one of the primary tasks is comparing the proposed amendment to the current plan, whether it's a change and whether, trying to determine whether a change is in line with county policies. For Popkins, we're considering a change in residential density, which can enable a different type of residential unit. So this is illustrated in the two images that are shown above. Both images are just totally illustrative examples, but they show visually the difference between the two current plan recommendations. So on the left-hand side, you have the current plan, which is 3 to 4 units to the acre and enables single-family residential development. It does not allow a townhouse development under the current zoning within that density range. And then the proposed plan, which allows both single-family as well as townhouses. So in addition to neighborhood compatibility, with Memorial Heights and Bryant Town Court on either side, one key factor is how can tree preservation under each be achieved. So on the left-hand side, the current plan recommendation has a plan potential for 16 single-family homes. And under current regulations, this would equate to a tree preservation of 20% of the site per county regulations. So the area for clearing to create single-family homes, their associated side, front, and rear yards, there's some clustering that can be enabled under the existing zoning, but the limits of this clustering are pretty small on such a small site. The proposed density range, 5 to 8 units to the acre, would enable townhouse-style units in addition to single-family. So townhouses generally can be more economical with the arrangement and use of the site. They have the potential to really cluster development in a manner that can retain the existing forested conditions in a greater proportion than under the current plan. And a higher density option would provide the ability for this cluster development compared to the R3 single family zoning could achieve. And you could also get transitions in terms of building types and screening as it relates to both Bryant Town Court and Memorial Heights. Given the known drainage and flooding issues in the surrounding area, development on the site that provides for stormwater controls while also retaining substantial portions of the existing tree cover can help increase the capacity of the site to absorb, treat, and retain stormwater. We'll get to this in a bit, but the recommendation that staff and the Planning Commission landed on, which would enable additional units, would be contingent upon a condition that more trees be preserved than you would normally get under the zoning for such a site. And including under the current plan recommendation. So that's the kind of the real important factor here. So you'd have under the proposed plan density additional units clustered and attached, but with a higher tree preservation target than you would have under the current plan recommendation. Regarding site access, the preferred primary access that was recommended by FCDOT or Department of Transportation would be from Popkins Lane due to the trip generation analysis that was conducted during the plan amendment study that showed only a moderate overall increase in weekday trips, very small increase in peak periods, but direct access onto an arterial was preferred. Secondary access could be either along or into Preston Avenue or Eastleigh Avenue cul-de-sacs for vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists. That's also recommended as a potential secondary access to help with traffic flow. This is a mock-up diagram. This is absolutely not an actual development plan. This is something that we put together to kind of see how could the site be laid out. So I wanted to kind of give you a couple of things to consider as you're looking through this. This schematic shows a tree preservation area, tree save area of 35%. So tree save was prioritized in areas with challenging topographical features that are less suitable for development per the policy plan, and in areas where we have identified as containing the most desirable stands of trees. So those being immediately behind the switching station and then at the back right-hand corner of the site. This is 57% overall open space for the entire site. So relatively large chunk that actually remains either undeveloped or remains as green area. A density of 5.3 acres is the developed portion of the site that's shown here. These units could be a mix of detached units and single family units. So they're both types of units are enabled under this plan. A couple of other things, the road access. So this is showing that primary access onto Popkins Lane. This one shows a connection into Eastleigh. However, there could be, if it works out better, there could be a different secondary access point onto Preston Avenue to allow for two options for travel. So Catherine Ward with the task force is here and is going to discuss the task force recommendation, just kind of high level bullet points. This proposed plan amendment was reviewed by the Mount Vernon task force in a series of meetings that was held from March through May of 2021. And the real thing that we kind of focused in on were the environmental considerations for the site with the task force. So that was very much a part of mind with the task force's review of this nomination. Their recommendation was to retain the current plan, and then also to defer review of the amendment to allow for Verizon to discuss potential for preservation of the site with the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust. I would note that the preservation piece was not a part of the board's request for the staff to study. So as a result, the proposed amendment was forwarded to the forwarded for public hearing to the Planning Commission and to the board. So back in June of 2021, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on the amendment, and they deferred their decision to July. And then at that meeting, the Planning Commission recommended that the comprehensive plan be modified with these specific criteria, these specific conditions, as detailed in a staff report that we have. So this would enable a new plan, a proposed plan that would enable residential development of up to 6 dwelling units to the acre, so up to 25 units compared to the existing plan potential of 16 units. So additional density, both single family and with a combination of townhouses would be enabled. Again, this is contingent upon 35% of the existing tree cover on the parcel being preserved, and then also supplemented with native plantings and the management of the invasive species that are on the site. So that's in contrast to the 20% tree preservation that you'd have under the current plan. And then additionally, there was language regarding stormwater management, that it should engineer controls should avoid conflicts with the tree preservation areas, and then also with the plan recommendation regarding primary access from Popkins Lane. So that concludes my presentation, but I know that both Catherine as well as Sherry Aiken, who's the nominator who put this proposal forward today, has a presentation I would also like to address the community as well, Nick.
Thank you, Graham, for that presentation. Next, I'll turn it over to Sherry Aiken from McGuire Woods, who is the representative of the property owner. Sherry.
Thank you. Hi, I am Sherry Aiken, and I'm a senior land use planner with the law firm of McGuire Woods. And if you could just give me 1 second, and I will pull up my presentation as well. Sorry if this not is my same problem that you had, Graham. My screen is freezing up slightly. Ugh. Well,
Jerry, we see your PowerPoint, but it's not in presenter view.
Yep, I think I'm trying to get to that right now. All right, can everyone see it?
Yep.
Okay, great. I apologize for that. You would think after all this time in virtual meetings, we'd have it down to a science, but gotta love technology. Again, thank you. Thank you, Graham, for giving me the opportunity to say a few words here. Again, my name is Sherry Aiken, and I'm a senior land use planner with the law firm of McGuire Woods. And it is a pleasure to be here this evening on as the nominator and on behalf of Verizon, the property owner. And Graham, you did an excellent presentation, so I'm going to apologize to the entire audience if I do repeat some things. So just bear with me, and I'll try not to take up too much time with repetitive information. But as staff explained, the property is a Verizon switching station, which I'm sure everyone is aware of. And Verizon owns the 5.5 acre parcel, which was originally approved for a switching station back in the 50s. Since that time, less than 2 acres has been needed for the telecommunication use. And back in 2015, some of you may remember it, we went through a special exception application to approve a permit of change of use on that back portion of the property. And so it could be developed with residential uses and technically be removed from the telecommunications use. And here is an aerial shot showing the approximate subdivision line and the back 4.2 acre portion of the property. Back in 2015, during that special exception process, we did have discussions with the Memorial Heights community, who of course had their concerns and questions, but overall did not oppose the concept of residential homes going in that back portion of the property as infill development. It was considered already in the comprehensive plan for residential infill development. And in fact, the community did see some potential benefits that could come out of it. For instance, as Graham explained, there is a well-known drainage issue that occurs along East Lee Avenue in this portion. And with the incorporation of some type of stormwater management controls, which currently don't have any, then there is a very likely possibility these drainage issues could be resolved or at least dramatically helped. And in fact, at that Planning Commission hearing last spring for this SSPA nomination, one of those same neighborhoods, or one of the same neighbors right in this area, expressed the same exact concerns about those drainage issues that he expressed 7 years ago. Also, at that time, we were advised and we're continuing to be aware that there are concerns about unwanted activity that goes on in these backwoods. And the community was supportive of some type of development that could go back here that would eliminate those problems. Last, as I was reviewing some of my notes, there was a desire from the community that with this development, the property would be improved even along this property frontage, and that if a redevelopment occurred, some of those frontage improvements could be made, such as finally adding a sidewalk along Popkins Lane, which would help for better pedestrian connectivity, especially with the 2 schools along Popkins Lane. And also, right now, there's not curb and gutter, so that would also be able to help some of those drainage issues. So I did want to take the time to provide a little bit of the background of those discussions that we had back in 2015. And also as a nominator, and here I am on behalf of Verizon, and I want to emphasize that this property is not currently for sale, and Verizon is not working with any developer at this time. So nothing is happening on this property itself. Graham did a great job of describing the SSPA process, which is what we're currently in. And it simply provides an opportunity for a property owner to update its comprehensive plan recommendations as may be appropriate. This SSPA process only comes around, every 4 years technically, but by the time all the hearings and everything occurs, it's really every 4 to 6 years. And so even though Verizon doesn't have any plans for this back portion of the property, we did have the opportunity to go into the SSPA process, and that's what we did. And also, I think it is very important to remind everyone that that this comprehensive plan change doesn't mean a developer could come in and simply redevelop it. Supervisor Stork and both Graham explained that at certain densities, a rezoning would be required. So my main point in telling you this is to assuage any fears, and talking with some of the neighbors, they were concerned that development was going to occur right now. And at this point, nothing is happening. If a rezoning went in, it would still be another 2 to 3 years, many more discussions with the community about a potential proposal. So that's just not on the plate right now. And so Graham did touch upon this a little bit. This isn't just another form of what you heard. Right now, since the property is zoned R3, we could, or a developer could come in and develop 12 lots on the property. They would not need to go through a zoning approval or rezoning. They would need to submit a site plan, but that is what a developer, if they purchase this back portion, could do. As Graham explained, the current plan text recommends 3 to 4 dwelling units per acre. And that means the developer could come in with 16 lots, but that's a little bit over the R3 zoning. So a developer would need to go in for a rezoning. And then the far right column is what I nominated with this nomination, which was 5 to 8 dwelling units per acre, which would produce 32 to 33 townhomes. My number's a little off from Graham, but I think that's really just a decimal issue. And then, as Graham explained, staff recommended a little bit less at 6 dwelling units per acre, which would produce about 24 townhomes, or 23 to 24. So this is a concept plan that we shared with the community back in 2015. Again, even back then, it was conceptual. Nothing was drawn up, but this shows that by right ability to construct 12 lots. As you can see, there's very little opportunity for tree save area. And then this drawing, which we submitted conceptually to county staff during this process, is really meant to show just how 32 to 33 townhomes could fit on this lot. It is conceptual in nature. Staff asked us to put something together, so conceptually we could see what it could potentially look like. Again, there's a connection to East Lee. There's a vehicle connection to Popkins Lane. This layout shows 32 townhomes and the tree save areas. And as Graham also mentioned, and the staff's recommendation brought it down to 6 dwelling units per acre, which as a nominator, we are okay with. And what that would mean basically, and that's a difference of about 8 townhomes. So you can see the difference. I randomly took this stick of 8 townhomes out of the concept drawing, which could be used for additional tree save, some type of community amenity, additional, open space, something along those lines. So overall, again, we do agree with staff's recommendation to reduce the original nomination to change the comprehensive plan language to 6 dwelling units per acre with a 35% tree save on the lot. which will fit in with this area. Here's an aerial of the Mount Vernon Route 1 corridor, which shows area densities and significant tree coverage. We had considerable discussions with the task force on tree preservation. Members of the task force expressed concerns about there being limited areas of standing trees in Mount Vernon. I did want to include this slide to show that there are several large parks in the immediate area. White Oaks, Mount Vernon Park, as well as Huntley Meadows. And I'm pleased that we could compromise and accept the recommendation that 35% of this site's tree canopy be reserved. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Sherry, for your presentation. Before we move on to questions from the community, I'd like to offer to Catherine Ward to present for a few minutes about the recommendation given by the SSPA task force. Catherine?
Okay. I actually did have a question, but I had to unmute, so I would like an opportunity to ask it when you have a chance to let me do that.
Yes, ma'am. So Ms. Ward is going to present some more information about what the recommendation was that the SSPA task force gave, but after she's done, you're welcome to ask your question.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I won't take a long time. I think both Graham and Sherry's presentations gave you the crux of where everybody is, with the exception of where the SSPA task force is. The task force believes that Verizon, as a corporate entity, should do their neighborly thing and put this property into conservation. They've been asked, and they were directed actually, to have serious conversations with Verizon leadership that can make decisions with the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust. Those conversations have not taken place, period, end of story. The folks from Northern Virginia Conservation Trust spoke with Supervisor Stork a few days ago and informed him of that fact. So we are not happy campers. The other thing is that, yes, there are a lot of trees in the area, and Sherry showed some very good opportunities to see a lot of trees. However, the North Hill site has been denuded completely. A very small section of it near the Bryant School is available with some trees. And so that leaves us with a lot less. That's about 20 acres of trees were completely taken down. The other thing is that recently the county has realized that it has a sewer infrastructure problem. So the more we build, the more we're going to have problems with our sewer infrastructure. Not sure how that is going to be resolved, but the more we build, the bigger problems we're all going to have in that area. Stormwater, while yes, they'll put in some stormwater management when a builder does come in and buy this property, but the county has realized they have a very large stormwater management problem. And Supervisor Stork a few months ago established a infill development stormwater task force that has been meeting to try to come up with how do we rectify issues related to this, particularly those when you can build by right, which Ms. Aiken has described that a developer could come in and build by right. But we still have issues with stormwater and sewer. So the bottom line is the SSPA task force still says leave it the way it is. We believe it sounds great that you'll get 33% tree cover, but we all know once you start developing, no matter what the site plan says, the county rolls over when the developer says, oops, we're going to cut too close to that. And that tree is eventually going to die. Therefore, let's take it down now. That is an ongoing situation. So again, the task force believes the comp plan should stay the way it is. And we make the recommendation that Verizon, the appropriate people, have this conversation to put this property into conservation through the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust. Thank you for your time.
Could I get your name, please? Because I missed it when I was unmuting.
Sure, it's Catherine Ward, and I sit on the SSPA task force. I'm also the co-chair of the Mount Vernon Council of Citizens Associations. And I live in the area.
Yeah, me too. And I totally agree with everything you just said. My family has owned the same house in Bucknell Manor from 1965 on, and I have never lived farther than a 15-mile radius from this community, this Groveton area. And everything this wise woman is saying is absolutely true. There is housing going up right behind my house. And when it first, years ago, I got a letter certified notifying me of construction that was supposed to go up. When I contacted Fairfax County to add my dissatisfaction with this area is completely and totally overdeveloped. When I called the county with the number I was provided, they said that it was a dead issue because the paperwork had not been sent out in enough time for people to protest, and it was dead, and I would be duly notified before it happened again. I'm disabled. I struggled out to walk my dog, and there was an entire neighborhood coming up right behind me where I had checked it after I had gotten that stuff, and there was a sign posted saying that it was a rainwater holding spot. Nothing was to be done there. Now there's at least 5 houses or 3, I can't tell from where I am, but in a huge amount of construction. And the person directly beside that has already told people that he runs a sump pump 24 hours, and what's going to happen with all the water that is now going to not go into the ground because of these houses that are there on their big non-absorbent support structures. And they said, oh, yeah, it's going to be better for you that now there's going to be no water here, no ground here to soak up the runoff. She is absolutely right. I have gone to Groveton High School, and the fact that there are no curbs or gutters there has never caused a drainage problem whatsoever. It is all the overbuilding that's going on around this area. And then when you do that, you then make the streets that are bisected highways and byways for pass-through traffic. I have to pray every time I cross my street because the traffic flies down West Hampton Drive to get from one end to the other. It is so dangerous. And this area is way too overdeveloped. She's exactly right about that area where Cherry Arms is, because now we've got all the wildlife there coming to our neighborhood. I came around the corner from Groveton, and there was a huge pointed buck and a baby deer standing in the middle of the road. If it had been 1 hour later, we'd have hit it. And then I was going to my sister's down the hill from where I live, and there was a doe standing in the middle of the road because we're getting all the wildlife that now has nowhere to go. So the last thing we need is to have more trees taken down and more houses put up. It's this, and clearly, I think a lot of people who are approving this may not live in this area, because I have seen since 1965 the detriment of all this overdevelopment. And this Ms. Ward is completely right about the sewage. Where is all this going to go? Because these neighborhoods were laid out when they were built, and they certainly never accounted for this the amount of influx that's coming in. And that's not to mention the crowded areas, because if you don't get your errands done before 2:30, the traffic around here is absolutely crazy. You can't get anywhere. 2 major stores have just closed down, the Safeway there by Mount Vernon Apartments and the Giant over on Hayfield. So there's nowhere to go. The area is way too overcrowded as far as housing developments go. And this, yeah, no more.
Ma'am, thank you for your comment. What was your name, and what street do you live on?
My name is Joanne Allen, and I currently live on West Hampton, but my family has owned the same house in Bucknell Manor. My parents lived there until my father died in '89, and then a few years later, my sister bought the house, because I was there to execute the will, and then my sister and her family bought the house. So our house has been in the same spot with the family member in it since we moved here in 1965. And I have watched every bit of this overdevelopment. I have seen flooding where there has never been flooding before. Shortly after I bought my house on West Hampton, the basement flooded, and I called a plumber right away to come. He checked everything in the basement thoroughly and said there is nothing here leaking. It's because there's not enough ground to soak up this water. So there you go. So it's just going to be more. Now, all the people where this housing is directly behind It's right behind, I don't know the end of the street because I've lived here so long. It's more like Mary's neighborhood or Mary Street, but it's either Island, Preston, somewhere in that area where there are a whole bunch of new houses going in. And it's directly behind half of my block. And we're thinking those people aren't going to start having more flooded basements. If somebody's already running a 24-hour sump pump, he's not going to be getting more water in his basement when there's now not that whole field of ground water absorption. And the end of my street, every time it rains, it floods down there in that corner. And if it's winter weather, it freezes into a big ice storm. People are out there putting wood blocks in it to try to make it passable and not get into all the neighborhoods. It's too much. It's just way too much. This area has seen way too much, and I've been here watching it all, and it's way too much. And I go outside and I wait for a volcano of sewage, because you can't have sewage from now all the people at the Cherry North, whatever they're calling it, by Cherry Arms. Now you have all those new hotels down by where the Wendy's used to be, and then you've got this whole PennDAW thing coming up. No, it's too much.
Well, thank you, Ms. Allen. And regarding the current construction, if you'd like to get some questions answered about it, you're more than welcome to email me, and I can connect you to the right folks in the county to hopefully answer your questions.
Oh, I would love that. Can you give me your email? Because I'm disabled. I don't have abilities to Zoom.
Sure. Would you like me to just say it out loud? And anyone is on the call is also welcome to take down my email.
Sure, that would be great.
So it's my first name, Nicholas, Nicholas,
Mm-hmm.
and then a dot, like a period sign.
Okay.
My last name, Reinhardt, RINE.
Uh-huh.
HART.
Okay.
At fairfaxcounty.gov.
Great. Okay. Because I was definitely advised that our neighborhood actually would be informed when this new construction going on behind us was, when the subject came up again, and I have got nothing about it. And I stopped worrying about it because I was told I did not have to worry about it, that we would be notified by certified mail again, and that the notification they sent, they had waited too long, so they hadn't provided us enough time to respond. So so that was at .gov.
fairfaxcounty.gov.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be excited about this, but I've seen this neighborhood go down detrimentally, and it bothers me as a very long-time resident. It's shocking to go out, and with the shutdowns, I was shut in because I'm disabled and because of the shut-ins, and then I go out and all of a sudden there's huge buildings here, no trees there. It's really been a shock to my system.
Understand that. Well, yeah, definitely anything we can do to help answer your concerns, we're happy to help. So I'll open it up to Graham or Sherry to kind of, if you want to give any response to Ms. Allen's question, or feel free.
I'll go if that's okay, Nick. First, I would like to address Catherine's comment about Verizon not being responsive about the task force recommendation, which was to delay the process for this SSPA nomination, which effectively has happened since hearings are starting to occur this spring for the regular track. But I have to say it's emphatically not true that we have not talked with Alan Rossum at Northern Virginia Land Trust, or that Verizon has taken the time to understand, well, actually to pursue your request. They had multiple conversations with McGuire Woods, who are experienced in land trusts. We had conversations with two Richmond attorneys, with Verizon, their attorney as well, to understand what the implications are. They have put a property in trust before in Maryland, historic, so they're very well aware of the tax benefits, what they can do. We did have a call with Alan Rossum with the trust, along with Christine Moran from Supervisor Stork's office. So there was a very productive call about everyone understanding what it means. And then I've had separate conversations with Alan and actually someone else from his office as well. So over the past spring and last summer, there were several conversations to be had. Verizon is well aware of what a trust would mean. They responded wholeheartedly to the task force request, and they did it honestly and responsibly. So I do want to clear that up and just make sure that is not a misunderstanding with you anymore, Catherine, or the community. And with that, that's really all I was going to respond to. I'm happy to chat with Ms. Allen anymore if she has any further discussions about what it could mean. But again,
I do have a question. Did they not say that some of the things that have been done were based on something done in the 50s, which was a very different picture of this area back in the 50s than it is now, because there has been way too much development in this area since the 50s, and it's too much. I mean, there are questions about sewage and drainage and all this stuff, because Bellevue, I've lived here for years, and until I was an adult, Bellevue never flooded. And then with the income of Porto Vecchio and all this stuff across the river, then Bellevue all of a sudden was underwater, and that had never happened before in my entire youth of living in this area. So there is already an impact of too much construction going on and the impact that it's causing. And as I said about the wildlife, I kept noticing that we were having more squirrels, and they get into the houses, they get into the attics, and it is causing havoc for the people who actually live here. So I'm just curious as to who doing all this approving. Do you actually live right in this area and have to deal with all the bad effects of all this overdevelopment?
Was that for me? I'm not sure. Yeah,
I believe so. I don't believe, Miss Allen, there was mention of people considering how this area was developed in the 50s during the presentation.
Well, they said something about the Verizon, something about the acres that Verizon owns being looked at in the 50s, or they got something, or based on what was done in the 50s. I was trying to take notes, but I have to hold the phone and try to do that with one hand.
Yeah, back in the 50s is simply when the switching station, the telecommunications use was established on the property. That's just, I was just letting you know when it first came about.
Because I thought they said something about some permission was given back then, but it's hard to hear and hold the phone. Thank you for clearing that up.
No problem. We have another question in the chat. I believe this is for Verizon. Is such a large company? Why is it so important for them to develop such a small piece of land compared to the total land what they own across the country, instead of doing the right thing and conserving it for the wildlife in the community?
Well, again, as I explained, Verizon is not planning to do anything with this property at this time. It's not for sale. They're not talking to developers. We entered into this process because the SSPA process came up in 2019, and you could submit a nomination to talk with staff about a possible change in comprehensive plan language that goes on across the county in two different cycles, the north and the south. And as a property owner, they have a right to go into the process and pursue their recommendations based upon current times. So with that, I mean, that's really all I have to say about it, because there's no development plans at this time in any manner whatsoever.
Okay, well, I was told that about the area behind my block, and all of a sudden there are several. I can't tell exactly how many there are because I can't walk up to the edge of the fence to see, but it was all completely wooded area and ground that was open to cover all to soak up all the rain that we get, and to try to keep it from coming into the houses. Now that whole area that was just open, like wooded area, soaking up all this water is now covered by at least 3 pads that is not going to be soaking up water. So I was also informed by several people, Alan Bacon at Fairfax, Bijmir, somebody, I can't remember their names, the notes are away, but I do have all the documentation that I took at the time. And I was assured that nothing was going to happen there until our neighborhood received a timely delivered certified mail. And I have not had not one word about it during the whole COVID, nothing. And then I struggled out to walk my dog and saw that all the stuff back there had been taken down.
Ms. Allen, if I could just interrupt and kind of steer the focus back onto what we're discussing tonight, which is a proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan for this site. If anyone has any specific questions about that, we'd like to answer those in the limited time we have left. I see that Jamie, you have a question.
If I could go next after him, I just have another minute to stay. Thanks.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, thank you. I'm Father Andrew Heisig, representing St. Louis Catholic Church, and Mrs. Ann Dyke was on with us for the first hour, but she's the principal, so I'll be representing the St. Louis Catholic School as well. Our biggest concern is just that proper consideration and planning is being made for the roads and traffic access, how that's going to go. As it is, it's been a difficult situation. We've got about 520 students in our school, so that means nearly 300 cars coming in. We don't benefit from any public busing, so we have about 300 cars coming in the morning and in the afternoon. Of course, we're right next to Bryant Alternative High School. When they switched when their schedule switched beginning this year, that created a big backup on Route 1. And we've done everything we can to reroute parents, sending them away from the highway, even if they're going down to Route 1, feeding them through the neighborhood in order not to block Route 1. That's been quite a thing to manage, but so we just want that to be whatever goes forward to make sure that's being considered and planned for. I don't know how much the studies look at that. There's also being schools, both Bryant and St. Louis being schools and having sports facilities. That's not just Monday through Friday. That's Sunday as well as not just during the week and the school day, but both our facilities are open for sporting events and evening activities Saturday and Sunday. So it really is a continuous thing, which I just want to make sure that that's on the view of as plans go forward to make sure that that traffic is taken into consideration. Thanks.
Thank you, Father Andrew. Jamie, go ahead.
I live in the area as well, and I'll keep it brief. But when I stop at the Pentagon or come back from the Pentagon, I get off on Huntington Metro. From there to my house, I can count at least 5 different complexes that have gone up or in the process of going up. This would make the 6th one. So when I turn down Popkins to come down, this would be the 6th property that's there. And I know that Graham, I believe you were saying that it would add just an incremental addition to the traffic. Well, that incremental plus the other incrementals plus the other incrementals plus this massive complex that's going down here at North Hill. What are your mitigation plans for Route 1? What are you going to be doing to address that? And I think it was Sherry, you said that there were trees that were in the area. Yeah, you're right, there are. But I see dead deer all the time going down on Mount Vernon. I have foxes that run through my backyard. So there is green area, but there's nothing wrong with leaving some of that green area. I'll stop. But Nick, as far as on that, are there plans to address traffic and in this area?
Hey, Jamie, this is Graham. So yes. I'll let Nick speak in a second, but just regarding both your comment as well as the father's comment regarding transportation, just want to kind of give you a snapshot of what we're looking at here. So I don't have the exact trip generation table pulled up in front of me, but I'm happy to send it to you for if you'd like to see it afterwards. When we're looking at it in terms of trip generation that's associated with the proposed plan amendment, we look at it in comparison to both what's on the site today, as well as what the by right potential is. So this is, if you were to develop the site today under the existing rules, the existing zoning,
The existing rules would be fine. It's when you take it from 16 or 12 or 12 or 16 and then have it to be up to 32. Granted, I would be in favor of no construction, but at the higher end on that's getting a little, it's more than we need around here.
Understood. So when you look at it in terms of the 16 compared to the 25 in particular, the total AM PM peak goes up by 1 or 2 additional trips. So I'd be happy to send you, and anybody else that wants to. Maybe I'll send it to Nick so that he can distribute it out. But the trip generation is negligible. The one thing I would mention regarding the transportation analysis that was conducted at this stage was that we were also looking at the Bell schedule for Bryant High School, and then also considering the additional trips that are generated with the church. And so that was part of the consideration for having 2 different potential points of access. Popkins seems to make the most sense in terms of it having a direct access onto an arterial, so not all of those trips go through Memorial Heights, but having the ability to have that secondary point of access seemed to make sense so that you're not having all of those trips, especially during the peak hours. When
my point though is that it is incremental. I got that, but that's all feeding into that arterial, which is getting onto Route 1. From here to Huntington, there's at least 6 major projects that are going on. It's completely a logjam on there. And Sherry, I know that they had done this 7 years ago, where there was people in the area that said, hey, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in those woods. Yeah, hey, this would help out the one person who has flooding. That was 7 years ago. There's been a lot of stuff that's been going on since then that I don't think that would be quite as amenable to having new construction. I'll stop, but thank you for doing this.
And plus, that's my point. You're trying to stop me from talking, but your arterial traffic is coming through the neighborhoods. And
I think there's
my
people that also want to talk too, though.
Well, talk, please, because that's the thing people aren't thinking about. Because my street, I'm crippled, and I'm taking my breath to cross the street because I've got this traffic that's being routed off Route 1 through the neighborhoods. And I lived here when the traffic limit was 5 miles an hour in this residential area. Now it's 25, and people doing are 35 to 40. And I live right at the top of the hill, so the cars fly up, and I've seen many almost collisions, and it's to add more traffic here. And I'm not sure who's doing this review of the traffic, but it is not people who live here and traverse this every single day to get what they need to get done. I'll guarantee you that, because if it was, they would be seeing the problem that we residents see.
So thank you, Ms. Allen and Jamie, for your comments. I'll briefly, I don't want to speculate too much on this because I'm not a transportation planner, and I can happily take your comments back to FC DOT, Fairfax County DOT, Jamie, who do a lot of similar trip generation studies for not just any proposed development which could potentially happen at this site, because again, we're talking about a comprehensive plan amendment that will allow, when a rezoning application goes in, for potentially, considering more dense development here. There are trip generation studies and analyses for all these developments, including for North Hill, including for the ones that are under construction along Route 1. You also have the bus rapid transit plan for Richmond Highway, where we're going to work on implementing bus rapid transit stops all along Richmond Highway from Huntington Metro to Fort Belvoir. That I think is in part designed to help alleviate some of the traffic you may see on some of the arterials and get people to take alternative modes of transportation. That's definitely one of the goals there.
Yeah, but that doesn't work, because we used to have Metro Bus, and then they broke it up into different things. I metroed to the Metro, and at 6 p.m. the Fairfax connector shut down. So if I had to get held up at work, I couldn't get a ride home unless I called somebody to pick me up, because the Fairfax connector shut down at 6 o'clock. So that's not a reasonable option to assume that people are going to use public transportation. People love their cars, and that's part of the problem. You're assuming that people are going to use that, and they don't.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Allen. So
Thank
also, and I don't want to comment too much further about what FCDOT studies and what they don't, because I'm not an expert in that, but I'm happy to follow up and get
I'll
you.
send you an email on that, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you.
But see, that's all part of this big problem that
Allen,
you get
please,
over development
Ms.
thinking, oh, yes, yes, because
I'm sorry to be rude here, but there are other questions that I'd like to get addressed during this time about the plan amendment. We understand your concerns, and again, I appreciate all your feedback. So I'm going to get some questions here from the chat, and then I see Catherine, you had a point to make, and then we'll go to Mr. Wagner here. There's a message here for Sherry, I believe a couple of questions from Melanie Frank. I guess to the previous question asked of you, Sherry, why are we talking about what types of residences should be developed if I'm assuming that means Verizon don't plan on developing. Why not conserve the land if you don't plan to do anything with the property, which is hard to believe because you said nothing would happen for 2 to 3 years, which implies they're planning for something to happen.
No, I can answer they're not planning anything. Again, this was the process, the SSPA process that the county afforded any resident in the county to put in a nomination about any property, especially the South County in this case. Verizon, and I'm kind of forgetting all the questions, the chat isn't up, what you just read. We mentioned the different development scenarios just to help the community understand what currently could be developed on this property, which is 12 single-family residential lots. A developer could go in right now and put in a site plan and develop it. That's just the fact of the matter. That's the zoning. They're permitted to do that. There is the comprehensive plan language that recommends 3 to 4 dwelling units per acre, where lots can be developed up to 16. A rezoning would be required there. And then with this nomination, I put in the next, and you have to understand a little bit about the specifics of the comprehensive plan and how the zoning ordinance works and how it's just laid out. There's a category for comprehensive plan designations of 3 to 4 dwelling units per acre. The next one above that is 5 to 8 dwelling units per acre. So I basically checked a box that I want to go, or I'm nominating this property to go from 3 to 4 to 5 to 8. And so I did want to respond to Jamie when he spoke about the 33 lots that could possibly go on. That's somewhat off the table now. Staff recommended a lower density of 6 dwelling units per acre with 35% tree save. And that's where it goes down to, if that comprehensive plan recommendation was approved, 24 could go on this. So the 35 isn't going to happen anymore. Verizon and me as the nominator find that very reasonable in terms of what staff did look at through this process. It's been much longer than a year. Staff actually has taken 2 years or the first year to go over all of those things. They looked at surrounding densities. They looked at vehicle trips, student generation, sidewalk connections. They looked at everything, and it was pretty impressive, the amount of analysis that staff went through. And so what we've come up with is this, or what they came up with as a recommendation was 6 dwelling units per acre. It's a little bit less than mine, but it is reasonable. And when you look at it on paper, it's only 8 more units than what could be developed according to the current comprehensive plan language.
Jerry, this is Jan Frank. I'm going to speak up here. Obviously, I'm attached to Melanie Frank. As I asked in my question, why did Verizon even enter you into the discussion about this issue if they weren't planning to sell the property to a developer? Leave it as it was for the 16 homes. You don't have these kinds of discussions unless there is a long-term plan. Come on, let's be realistic about this. Mel's home backs right up to the, I guess, I'm not sure which direction it is, off of Woodlawn Avenue. She has the largest property that spans the back. It gets a lot of water. The wildlife there, as everybody has mentioned, you showed the picture of the overhead aerial view with beautiful parks, you know, out there on each side. And then this high, you know, and let's face it, those homes are close together that surround that Route 1 corridor. That little 5-acre piece of parcel of property is pretty much where much of your wildlife reside. And everybody in the discussion has mentioned that's an issue. Verizon needs to do the right thing here. I mean, they really do. And putting a proposal forward to have even higher density than it was originally discussed certainly is their right. But why are they even entering into the discussion if they're not going to do something?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can express anymore that there's nothing in the works. This is a SSPA process and we entered it. And if I could comment on one of the things that you said, this nomination actually is a little bit better for the community and will protect its resources a little bit more, because right now there's no requirement to save 35% of the property. So with this, even though there are 8 more units proposed or could possibly go in with this recommendation, there's 35% of the tree save that would be required, which is well over zoning ordinance requirements. So,
but again, if they have no plans to do anything, as you keep telling everyone, they don't have any, but you have the right to certainly go in the proposal process. Why even enter it? Okay, that's the big question here. Why are you entering it if nothing is going on the plate? And obviously there is. And I think it's very unfair to this community that you are not being upfront about that.
well,
And as an attorney, yeah,
and I am honest and forthright, and I am not pulling the wool over anyone's eyes here. I have said this for well over a year in all the meetings that I presented this application to, and that's the fact. So you can be mistrustful if you'd like. I get it.
I'm not trying to be mistrustful. I'm trying to understand why you are doing this process when it is unnecessary, as you keep telling everyone.
Because
you just said, we're not required to do it. We've chosen to enter the process because we can. That doesn't fly with anybody.
Because the next opportunity to have a process is several years from now. So
again, the question of doing the right thing here.
I think I'm not sure. I think I've answered as best as I can.
No, unfortunately, you have not.
Okay. Right, and you can try to shut me up, but I'm mistrustful because I was assured by the county that nothing was going to happen in the area right behind my street, and now there are at least 3 that I can see big houses there. So I am mistrustful. I'm mistrustful because I was assured by the county that we would be given ample notification before any activity in that wooded area back there would happen. That did not happen. So yeah, I am mistrustful.
Again, Ms. Allen, I apologize for what you've experienced then with that. And again, my offer still stands for you to email me and I can be happy to look into that for you. And we only have 10 minutes left in our scheduled meeting time. So I'd like to, just table this discussion for now and move on to some other questions. But just before I forget, the board decision on this is March 22nd. And you all are more than welcome to email Supervisor Stork's office about, your concerns about this proposal or any other comments as well. So, Catherine, did you have something to say?
I will, but why don't you see what Adam wants first?
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Mr. Wagner, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay. Thanks. First, thanks thanks to everybody, Nick and Graham and Sherry and Catherine, for presenting your thoughts and for having this meeting. I appreciate it. I live on Groveton. I'm about 4 or 5 houses removed from the wooded area. And just a couple of thoughts. I'll try to be brief. One is that every time there is development on Route 1, there is flooding, increased flooding. That is true. It's happening in my yard. Sometimes it impacts my basement, but we've seen it in the yard increase significantly. And you know, I'm actually in favor of more development on Route 1. I followed the master plan relatively closely, and I'm all for it. But that's how I feel about Route 1, where, you know, we have the opportunity to one day, you know, bring the metro, you know, closer to Groveton and all of that. But as we develop Route 1 and increase these, you know, these larger mixed use developments that have been talked about a lot, at least, I really feel like we're going to be missing our wooded areas that are off of Route 1. This area that I live in, it does not have parks really within walking distance. It has schools that have playgrounds, but it doesn't have parks within walking distance of where I live. I live right in the middle of where we're talking about. And schools aren't the same. You know, a lot of times you can't take dogs to a school, for example. So right now, those woods are a wooded dumping ground. They're dirty, they're gross. Keeping it as is, to me, is not a good idea. And you know, here we are talking about changing it to either, you know, McMansions or townhomes. Well, I mean, if that's the decision, then keep it as it is, which is McMansions, because if you build McMansions there, it's going to increase my property value more than than you building townhomes, whether or not you've kept trees. That you know, so for me, keep it as it is. But if you're going to change it to anything, and I don't know the process. I don't know when you bring up, can we change it into a park, or can we, you know, clean up the dumping ground that it is right now? Then that's the conversation that, in my opinion, we should be encouraging. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you, Adam, for your comments. I don't know if Graham, if you wanted to respond to that, or I have a couple comments as well. So
Go ahead.
Yeah. So Adam, I would just say that, you know, those kind of conversations are certainly what staff considered in evaluating this plan amendment, and also I think what will be considered for any future rezoning, as has been kind of stated by Graham and by Sherry in their presentations. And as far as your question as parks, I will add, you know, you all have mentioned the North Hill development. Part of that development is going to be a 12-acre public park, which, you know, you'll have access through Bryant High School. So that is something that is will be somewhat walkable to you all in the future. And I believe as part of the North Hill development, I know they're already constructing the apartment component and the townhome component. I believe they start construction on the park this spring. So just keep eyes out for that. And, you know, obviously we are always looking for more opportunities to develop parks in the area. Catherine, you wanted to?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. Sherry's right. The SSPA only comes up about every 4 or 5 years. However, there are always out-of-turn plan amendments, which Verizon can request anytime. So that's just a data point. Don't need to do anything with it, just to inform the citizens. The other thing, by right developers are running around like crazy in the Mount Vernon area, buying up properties, particularly those when a senior citizen passes away and the land they own may actually be 2 historically platted lots. So what they're doing is they're coming in by right and they are building shotgun houses on these properties where there was once one single home. They demolish every tree known to man, and it creates other issues with stormwater. So just be aware of that. In our neighborhoods, in your neighborhoods, there will be lots more of that coming. And one of the reasons, as I understand it, and Sherry may want to say, no, I don't know what I'm talking about, but as I understand it, in a conversation that was had with some Verizon folks, one of which I actually had, well in advance with one of the Verizon realtors, is that the higher density they get for this property, if they should choose to put it into conservation, they can then demand more money, because what they do is they sell the conservation easements to a developer who needs it to build someplace else. And that's all about the money. And that's how the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust comes in. So that may be one of their tactics. Let me make more money. We contend as a task force, and I personally contend, is that Verizon's got enough money. They could do the right thing as good citizens, and they could simply put this property in conservation now and get the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust to come in, clean up the trees that shouldn't be there, plant more trees, and make it a much nicer place for everybody. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Catherine. So we have about 3 minutes left in the meeting time. I do see one additional question in the chat from Carmen. If Verizon gets the approval, does that give them the right, I'm assuming that means approval of the plan amendment, does that give them the right to develop without informing the community? I can start and I would say no. Any future rezoning, like I believe both Graham and Sherry have indicated in their presentations, would go through an extensive public process, have similar community engagements to this one. It would go before the Planning Commission for a public hearing and before the Board of Supervisors for a public hearing. And, throughout that, staff, for any development in the Mount Vernon district, staff usually goes through a process of seeking, engagements and resolutions of support from, surrounding civic associations, such as the MVCCA, which Catherine co-chairs. So hopefully that answers that question. I think we have time for, one or two quick questions, if anyone has any. Okay. Well, again, thank you all for attending. Thank you, Graham, Sherry, and Catherine, and Megan for attending. I will post this recording on the Popkins Lane Plan Amendment website, which I put in the chat, and it'll be available there. And again, the decision on this plan amendment is scheduled for March 22nd before the Board of Supervisors. And I also put our Supervisor Stork's email in the chat. It's mtvernon@fairfaxcounty.gov. That's mtvernon@fairfaxcounty.gov. You're more than welcome to email that email or my email with any additional comments about it, and I'll work to get those answered ahead of the decision on the 22nd. So again, thank you all, and hope you have a good rest of your evening. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.